Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Oh, Marilyn, how you changed?
Happy 932nd birthday.
I look pretty good for that, too.
To you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, Make-A-Wish blow candle. Yeah, look at you. All right. Look at you. Look at
Digital
you.
breath, boy. That's a new phenomenon.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Alex Simmons' 932nd birthday.
And give or take a decade or two. Yeah.
We are celebrating all weekend long. We're just telling Alex that no, he just took a nap and it's still the same day. We're going to see if we can get it going for a whole month. Today's episode is all about how did we say it was?
No, this was your idea. I just came equipped with stuff.
This is going to be the wisdom and wonder as Alex turns 932. All right.
I'm reminded of Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner. Yeah,
it's
a 1,000-year-old dude. Yeah,
it's kind of like that today. All of us are on a writing journey, a creative journey, and sometimes we're so caught up in running forward that we never look back. So today, ladies and gentlemen, in this very special episode of Tell the Damn Story, we are going to talk to our birthday gentleman here about origins of creativity. And then about using that creative journey, the ups and downs, the successes, the frustrations to fuel your continued creativity. And then how you still have that burning and it propels you into the future. It's well worth coming on this journey with us, ladies and gentlemen. That is Alex Simmons. So what I'd love to do is just throw some questions your way, Alex, that you are completely unprepared for. So the idea today is to see the value of perspectives of each of our own writing journeys. And we're going to use Alex on his birthday month. That's right. He gets a whole month. That's how old that mother is. As a role model for how we can reflect. So
role model or test dummy, I'm not sure.
So let's start with a light, easy question.
Oh, okay. In 1747,
you actually started showing storytelling, a penchant for storytelling, while you were still a teenager, creating films with your friends, superhero films, that kind of stuff, heroic journey type things. So I want to see if you can go back that far.
Let me warm up the time machine.
You want a way back machine. Yeah. And your thoughts about what you were doing then. We usually aren't thinking about careers at 14, 15, 16 when we're making stories up. I remember spending hours drawing this rock band of superheroes or something that were all based on my friends. And I showed it to them and I was like, so many different people, and it was all thought out. And this one guy was like, "Who the hell said we're going to do this?" And that's when I first learned the difference between the creative mind and the other.
Dullard.
Whatever you want to say. That guy wound up having a couple of civil service jobs. That was his thing. Just go there, go to the bar, watch a Yankee game. That's life. What's wrong with you? I could never answer them as to what was wrong with me. There you are. I think it was like 14, 15, 16, making films. Did you even realize you were being creative?
Okay. To answer that question, I got to shoot the dial back just a little bit further. I was the product of a single mom, great single mom, very wonderful, tolerant, patient soul. And I loved comic books and I loved watching movies on television. Occasionally, I got to go to the movie theaters. But I was always fascinated with stories, always. Whether I was reading them on the flat page or I was watching them on a screen, I just imagined myself having those adventures or going to those places and things like that. and afterwards with my action figures would pretend to do this and that and the other. Don't think that I thought of myself as creating stories, and one day I'd grow up to write and draw stories when I was 13, 14. I think what I was really doing was living out an ambition to see more and to do more and to have more exciting things happen in my life. And maybe because of, again, it was a single mom and my dad wasn't in the picture. Um, Maybe trying to emulate some of the male heroes that I was using as role models, which would involve some of the known characters like a Batman or something like that. But also there were certain characters on television that I just thought that was cool. And you get to help people and you get to fight bad guys and you get to travel and you get to figure things out. And so I think
So
I felt more like I was trying to set up some sort of master chart for what I was going to do when I grew up. I was going to go do this stuff and I was going to be this kind of person.
I,
I really don't think I was thinking about becoming a writer or even an actor at that time at 13 or
uh,
14.
I think we might have something in common. It's a quick yes or no. At that age, was superhero on your menu of possible careers?
Super, I guess if you consider Batman a
Yeah, yeah.
superhero, then
Yeah, I was very
yeah,
practical about it. I
yeah.
really loved Captain America, but I was getting allergy shots every week and nothing was super soldier. So I started looking at the Falcon. I was like, I have a better shot of being something like someone like him. He didn't have super soldier serum in there. He's the guy in the neighborhood who wants to help.
Yeah.
Uh,
And works out
I
and
didn't
talk to
I
birds.
he had to edge out Hawkeye because my mom wasn't going for an archery set in Bronx apartment. So the Falcon was like, I was like, and about the bird. What am I gonna do with the bird? Yeah, it's just hours I would think about this stuff because I thought it was a career move. So
Did you have a parakeet?
no, no,
Yeah,
no. There was a couple of pigeons out the house.
there you
Uh,
go.
I didn't want to be the pigeon, but there you go. At what stage in your life do you start in any way, shape, or form, beyond or above and beyond rote school assignments? When do you start putting pen or pencil to paper? And was it words or was it drawing at first?
Drawing at first. It was definitely drawing right through junior high or middle school, as it's now called. I applied for two art high schools, specialized art high schools in New York City. And to my great joy and thrill, made both of them
That's good.
and went to one, art and design, which was at the time on the corner of 57th Street and 2nd Avenue. And I lived uptown on 103rd on the west side of Manhattan. So it was schlepped down 50 some odd blocks to 57th Street and then head east another, I don't know, 9 blocks or something like that. I never really
Yeah.
counted them now that I think about it. But that was my commute each day by bus or train. And drawing, yeah, I was going to become an illustrator. And I definitely, by the second year in high school, was thinking comics because
Oh,
that had
wow.
been one of the things that I loved was reading comics. So I'm going to learn to draw comics and I'm going to become a great comic book artist. And it's going to be really cool. And I'm going to create heroes or at least certainly get to draw stories about some of my favorites.
There's another thing we have in common that you may or may not know is that I had made art design, music and art design.
Oh,
And I had gone down with a buddy of mine. My buddy didn't make it. And my mom immediately started marketing that going to that school through the South Bronx, which was on fire in the 70s, and having to get out in Manhattan within the first 4 days, I would be dead. So, yeah, Mother's Day is a special day. But
okay.
yeah, and
So
it's
you have a
weird.
contemporary who did do that.
Who
And
did
she's
what?
a friend of both of ours.
Yeah, Liz went there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now she might have been like a senior when I was a freshman or something like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but it would have been a chain of command there.
Yeah.
So I don't know what would have befallen me had I gone there and disappointed my mother by not dying. I know. There you go. Hey, Ma, you're drawing and you're training to become a comic book artist. When was the shift over to the written word?
Wow.
Because you still sketch now. I mean,
Yeah,
you've
I
always
still sketch
sketched.
now, and I still wrote stories then, but I wasn't thinking of writing as a pursuit.
That was a vehicle to give you information,
To draw,
right?
right. And the other end of that is I had two good buddies when I was in middle school, Michael and Angelo or Angel. And we were the ones who did the superhero 8 millimeter movies in Central
Right,
Park and on the
right,
rooftops and things. And so I wrote stories for us to film,
right.
some of which we actually got to film, and others which I suspect if I go through my stack of spiraled notebooks from the past, go down into the crypt and get
Oh
them,
yeah.
that I'll find some scrawlings about this. But I used to always make up stories, some of which got me in trouble with my mom, but that's another episode. So what can I tell you?
The
Uh,
erotica files of
yeah,
Alex.
I was a nerd. I was romantic, but I was a nerd. So I was making up stories. I was writing stories to some degree. Then I got into art and design, and I'm going to draw stories. And sometimes I would sketch out a story, and then let me write something down. And so that happened. So by the time I was graduating from high school, I'd gone into another sort of creative tunnel. I had been doing stuff on stage throughout high
Mhm.
school, and I even produced our last high school show, which was an extravaganza of 2 hours. That's another story too. But anyway, so when I left high school, I was going to pursue acting, and I did for several years, and I got to do voiceovers and extra work in films and things like that. But this is also when I started to look at writing more and drawing less. And part of that was because of, we're talking the early 70s, and we'd gone through the 60s and the explosion of the civil rights movement and rights in general. And so there were more films and plays and poetry and books being written with Black leads and Black stories, or stories about Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and even more respectful representations of Chinese and all of that. So the early 70s was a time period where I was thinking, wow, I'd like to be this in a film, or I'd like to be this on a stage. And I started to write stuff to audition with. So I would write monologues and things like that to take to auditions. And some of my actor friends at that time said, well, write me a monologue. I've got this audition coming. I'll write this right. And then finally, and I'm getting there, finally, one of my great loves from childhood right on up to today was Sherlock Holmes stories.
Sure.
Yeah. So at some point, for Lord knows what reason, I'd gone. Oh, I remember. I went to see a play at what was called the Negro Ensemble at that time, a very prominent Black theater company here in New York, one of the forerunners of a lot of the things that are happening now. And they had just debuted a play called A Soldier's Play,
I remember that.
and it was about Black soldiers during World War II. And one of the actors in that, I became friends, and he introduced me to a real life actor from the 1800s, a Black actor, an American Black actor who'd gone over to Europe by the name of Ira Aldridge. And he existed during the time, a real character, existed during the same time as Sherlock Holmes. And I'm looking at all of this stuff that Ira Aldridge did, and what a great story that would make. And I'm thinking, of course, cross patterns. Yeah, right around the time that Sherlock this and Sherlock that, I'm thinking, whoa, there would be a story. And people say, well, why don't you just write a story about Ira Aldridge? And I remember at some point saying, maybe a few hundred people might come to see a story about Ira Aldridge, but thousands of people would come to see a story about Sherlock Holmes and
Right,
learn about Ira Aldridge.
right.
And
And
so
what did
that's
that
what I,
become?
excuse me,
What did that become?
that after Mondo work, several
Yeah.
years, and deciding that I shouldn't be the actor scribbling something that I could perform in, and had to
Right.
commit to being the writer and taking that seriously so that I could do the best job possible. That became Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello.
Mm.
which was a character that Ira Aldridge had actually portrayed on stage, the character of Othello, the Black Moor.
Yeah.
And that play received a number of preliminary readings and stage readings, things like that, and eventually wound up as an off-Broadway production.
Who owns that now? Ah,
It'd be mine. It'd still be mine.
hmm.
But that's the
Is it in
evolution.
print these days?
Funny you should mention that. The only place it's in print.
Black
By
letter.
the way, you'll notice I don't have my special backdrop on today because I brought show and tell things. Now, remember, this is actually for folks, we are all at one point in space and time aspiring or emerging writers. Okay.
Right.
This was my first full-length play.
Mm-hmm.
For it to go through multiple readings with legit actors and all that, and for me to realize I had to be the writer, that was a rite of passage. For me to learn what I didn't learn or what I didn't know, that was a rite of passage. For me to commit to getting the language as well as possible, that was a rite of passage. I still did not expect to eventually have it produced as an off-Broadway production, to have it playing at the same time as a Broadway production of Sherlock Holmes and get somewhat better reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And then to have somebody in the in the audience of our small little theater come at me and say, I'm putting together an anthology of Black playwrights, and I want to add yours to the anthology. And I'm thinking, okay, this must be newbies, and it's going to be like a little pamphlet and stuff like that. And I'd be honored. And it took a couple of years, I think, for this particular gentleman who was named William Branch to complete the anthology and to get it published and everything by Signet. But this newbie,
You own the rights.
unknown, hang on here now, this newbie, unknown, fresh off the farm kind of playwright got published with George C. Wolfe, Steve Carter, Leslie Lee, Amiri Baraka, Ed Bullen. These are people I consider serious playwrights,
Oh, yeah.
serious established playwrights. And that blew my mind. And from that point on, I acknowledged that, yes, it was the best thing for me to do to commit to writing the play as the writer, because that was the correct thing to do. But it also turned me on to the reality that I enjoyed writing, and maybe that was something that I really did want to seriously pursue. And to answer your question, yes, I do own the rights. This is one of those things where they have the rights to publish it in this book, but yes, I own
What
full
year did
rights.
that come out?
Oh boy, we're talking some time ago. As you said, I've been around for a while.
I own a copy of that.
Let's see here. What is the pub date on this? I think it's the 80s.
Yep.
Oh, first printing is 1992.
Hmm.
1992. Yes.
I
So that
think that's
answers that question. That was my
well,
long-winded answer about how I got
yes.
into this writing thing.
I think that should be published as its own thing. Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello, with after the script, after the play, a history of that play. Right. Oh, could you just come here for a second, sir? Excuse me for
Yes, quite all right.
Yeah.
Quite all right.
look at this fella. Come on.
My
all right.
goodness.
Hello.
Oh, hey, ooh,
There's a birthday
Sharp.
present for you.
There you
That's
go.
a birthday
Sharp.
present.
look at him.
He's going.
Yeah,
He
wedding.
smells good.
All right.
He's
Thank you.
going to a wedding of.
Oh, that's where my daughter went to one yesterday out in Jersey.
All right.
He's going to celebrate the voice of the West. A friend of his from high school and college who moved out to Idaho. She come back for a wedding.
Oh, I thought he was going to Idaho.
Glorious, who has an amazing gift for gab.
Yes.
You look spectacular.
He does. He
Please
does.
tell her congratulations for us
All right.
and enjoy.
All right.
Yeah,
I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
she doesn't know me from a hole in the wall, but give her my
Alex
congratulations.
says she doesn't know him from a hole in the wall, but he says congrats as well.
All right. I'll let her know.
All right, Smooth.
Okay.
Bye.
Take
There
care,
you
buddy.
So
That's my godchild.
That's right. That's why we brought him on camera, ladies and gentlemen. That was a rare guest appearance from Tyler, godson Ryan. I will tell you a story about his fictional thing a little later if you want.
Okay.
But I think that Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello should be published in its own volume. And I think that there should be a section afterwards when you talk about the history and the attraction to writing and why, just how you just explained it to us, and then where it's been and what you think it does for uh, creatives and Sherlock Holmes fans and African American history fans, so like that. And if you wanted to off screen talk about, and we could come to a price that was affordable to Seamus Annunzio Productions.
Notice how he
We,
segued into that, folks.
that's right. We could publish that, and the rights would immediately return back to you. It would just be a one-time right to have the honor of publishing that in its own volume. So if you're interested, no pressure since we're doing this on the
Since it's being recorded.
happy birthday. But yeah, I think that would be a great thing along the lines of what we did with Rebecca. And her book is getting great reviews from influential people and is up for a sinisterscoop.com Golden Scoop Award for favorite horror adjacent book. So go to sinisterscoop.com
Yeah,
and
try
vote
saying
for
that 6 times
Rebecca.
fast.
There you go, Golden Scoop Awards. Yeah, so let me know what you think about that. I have some ideas on the cover and all that sort of stuff. We'll have to rustle up someone I'm thinking about, but yeah, bro. There we go.
Okay.
All right, so you've done that. You did Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello, and things started getting interesting. But you were also somewhere in that time hanging around comic book offices. And what was that all about? Because there is something to the concept. See, now we've done, for those of you who are saying, what's in it for me? We've done the idea of being near what you love and then writing as a way to do the other stuff and then realizing, wait, writing is, and then combining the character you wanted to write about with a character that's going to gain attention for the main topic. So that's, we've done a lot of little lessons, but Alex Simmons spent a lot of time around the comic book offices of two fairly large companies, up and coming strugglers, Marvel and DC. And what was that? Again, sometimes we just want to be in the room. Best thing I ever heard from a stand-up, I actually think it was Seinfeld. I think it was him who said, I didn't really care if I bombed or not. I wanted to be in that room and stand with those people. I just wanted to be part of that. And then the craft increased. So how about you? Talk to us about your time wandering the halls of imagination.
I guess, again, let's hop back a few years prior to give a running start. You get bit by certain bugs in your life, especially if your imagination is unshackled, and then you get a taste of possibilities. So when I was 11 years old, I used to watch a kids show called Laurel and Hardy's Show with
Can,
Beth
sure.
McCann and the Paul Ashley puppets and little hand puppets.
Mm-hmm.
And they were puppets of Laurel and Hardy. And they do stuff and then have some Laurel and Hardy stuff. And
This
then eventually
McCann
Chuck,
could do the imitations, right?
yeah, oh yeah, Chuck was
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic. I'm going to build to that. Chuck was so good that after I think it was about a year or so, WPIX here in New York gave him his own show. It's a Chuck McCann show.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at that point when I was 11. And he had like kids in the audience.
Right.
So I won a ticket to be on the show.
Wow.
So my mom's took me, and I remember sitting, they had folding chairs and the camera was facing me, and I remembered that, and again, this is going somewhere. I remembered that it had been about a year since he had really had started on WPAX. So I talked my mom into baking a chocolate cake. Yeah. And so we brought that with us. So
Marketing, ladies and gentlemen, even at that tender age.
yeah. So we told him and his directors and everything, we have this cake for him as an honor, as a thank you and a year and honoring all that. And so they said, oh, we're going to do that on camera. So I'm sitting in the first row of these folding chairs, and there's another row behind me, and there's a few kids here, not a ton. And Chuck's sitting in the row behind me so that the camera's here where you
Right,
are.
right,
And I would talk to Chuck in profile, but
right.
he's slightly behind me, so you get a more of a full figure of him. So we pre-cut the cake, right? And he says, so I understand you brought me a cake for my anniversary and everything is really great. And I said, yeah, Mr. McCann. And they took the slice and they gave it to him with a little plastic fork. And he says, well, thank you very much, Alex, and everything. And he takes a mouthful of it and starts choking and dying on camera.
Oh no.
And I'm going, oh my God, oh my God. And of course, it was a joke. He was faking it and he turned it into a joke and it was fun and everything. They broke for a commercial and I wanted to hit him with the rest of the cake, but I didn't. We talked for a bit and then he made the mistake of saying, oh, come back anytime.
Oh no.
He should never have told me that because remember, I lived uptown on one bus route and then 42nd Street and 2nd Avenue, where the Daily News building was and where WPIX, the TV station was really just a cross-town bus ride. So at 11 years old, I would get on the bus and ride down to 42nd and then get on a crosstown bus and ride over. So I popped in there several times.
Oh really?
Yes, I popped in there several times and got to know some of the other kids show hosts and things like that. So that developed in me, and again, I abbreviate that story. That developed in me a belief that if you could meet people who did the kind of stuff that you were amazed by or did the kind of stuff you wanted to do, that you could do, that they weren't on the screen and untouchable or unreachable or
Right, right.
unreceptive. And so the first Comic Con that I got a chance to go to, I was, I don't know, maybe 13, 14. It was at a small hotel here in New York City. That's when cons were not the big events that they've become. And then the next con I went to was when I was 17. And that's when I met someone who became my friend for many years, Don McGregor.
Wow.
And he
You
was
were
there.
in Detectives Incorporated with Don McGregor, which people can look up on YouTube and
Yeah, yeah.
see Alex Simmons
But not at
acting,
17, though,
being a
much later in life.
being a tough guy
Yeah,
on YouTube.
yeah, yeah. But that was years later. But I met him when I was 17. I think he was maybe a couple of years older, 3 years older, something like that. And we became friends and started shooting 8 millimeter movie adventures like I'd done with my other friends, Michael and Angel. And he eventually, because he was an avid comic book fan and had written a number of letters to the editors and all that,
Right.
eventually, after a few years, he was invited to come and work at Marvel. He got a job working at Marvel in the editorial offices. And then he, of course, eventually moved into the phenomenal writing career that he's had and wrote the Black Panther, things like that. But because at the time we were friends and he was in the offices, if I would go meet him when he was going to get off work or something like that, I was then in the Marvel offices and got
In
to
the
meet
room
some of
where
the
it
writers
happened.
and illustrators. Yeah. So I met Johnny Romita Sr. when he was still working as an artist there at Marvel, and Marie Severance and so many others, and Stan Lee,
Yeah.
who was then, as he was probably maybe up to the last couple of years of his life, approachable.
Yeah.
And so literally he would sometimes come out of his office going somewhere else in the building, bump into me, remember me as Don's friend, start talking to me just about stuff. And you could have this quick little fun, simple conversation with him. And okay, got to, and off he go. But remember, and off he go. And that was
How old were you around this time?
17, 18. No, I met Simon when I was 17, so probably about 19 at this point. 19, yeah, going on
And that
20.
was the 60s or the 70s?
That was 70s. It would be like 72,
Okay.
something like that.
Just a
And
quick aside, I think it was around 77. And I've told this story quick, so I don't have to this story before, so I'll tell it again. But I was like a freshman or sophomore in high school,
ah,
and our lit magazine, the editor, the teacher editor, decided we were going to do a magazine based on New York. So everything had to be based on New York. And in my naivete, I called the Marvel offices in my little high voice and asked for an interview. Whoever answered the phones for Stan laughed and said, "It's pretty busy. What's your deadline?" And it was like, this was September and it was like March or something. So she laughed. She said, "I think we can squeeze you in." And she gave me a date and a time. And when I called, she said, "Oh, yeah. Okay, hold on." And Stan came on and he answered 3 or 4 questions. He said, "Oh, I have to take this call. Give me your number. I'll call you right back." And and I, only, and I'm standing and staring at the phone. "What are you doing?" My mother said. I said, "Stan, I was interviewing Stan Lee, and he said he's going to call me right back." And she, like hockey player, body checked me when the phone rang and picked it up and started going off about how she likes the Hulk. By the time I got the phone away, he said, "That was great, but I only have time for one more question." He took one
Oh
more
my
question. That was it.
goodness.
But that's how approachable. And you'd never it. Here's what this is leading to, because for me, I saw the names, but it never seemed like this was a job and that human beings were doing this stuff. And that was when it finally dawned on me that you can go and do a job that lets you create. So did your time at Marvel make you start realizing that creativity as a career was an option?
Oh, absolutely. That realization had come to me sooner, but I
Well,
did not.
you're the wise one in this
Yeah, well,
group here, buddy.
again, much like you observe and then your brain suddenly kicks in and goes, "Wait a minute." Again, WPIX, Chuck McCann, Officer Joe Bolton, Jack McCarthy, all of those people showed me behind the scenes, behind the camera stuff, and I went, "Son of a gun." And then the comic book world, being able to go up to the offices and see Johnny Romita and Marie Severance and Marv Wolfman and all these people and see what they were doing and Stan Lee and recognize that these were all people who were equally passionate about their creative professions.
Right.
They were making comic books. It wasn't like, "Oh yeah, I gotta make comic books because I can't get a real job." It was, "We get to draw this and we're doing this and we're telling these stories and it was real for them.
Right.
And I think a lot of that energy translated into the material that we, the consumers, were purchasing off the shelves. And I know that being in that environment, being able to just drop by was infectious. But certainly I was getting more reinforcement of two things. One, yes, creativity can be a lifelong profession, can be enjoyable. The other thing I was getting is that with some sort of a plan, you're allowed to go after this.
Yes.
You're really allowed to pursue this, and there are ways to do this. And the one thing that I'll give that I really learned from a lot of these people, many of the people that I met this way, as opposed to some of the people I met years later, is that your name is your reputation.
Mhm.
And if you take this job, you do the job.
Right.
You may gripe and grumble about it. You may not like some of the people you're connecting with, but you don't shortchange your audience. And if your name matters to you, bring your A game as much as you possibly
Yeah.
can. And that was a great lesson to learn from a lot of these folks, in particular, even years later, when I had the good fortune of becoming a friend of Dick Giordano, who was a artist and also eventually an editor and a VP at DC Comics.
Right.
Dick told me stories about his life as an artist back in the 50s. And yeah, it was a job, but it was a job that he honored. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, "Oh, thank God I'm bowing to." It was, "I'm hired to draw these images. I'm hired to draw these pages. I'm going to do my best work."
Yeah.
And he talked about that while trying to feed his family
Yeah.
and build up a career for himself.
I want to do two things quick.
Okay.
Okay.
I have more show and tell stuff too.
Yes, yes, that's where this is going to be pretty quick. And then we're going to go to a little darker area of the creativity. First,
What do you mean by that? No.
you'll see. Let's talk about the name characters that you've had the experience of writing and seeing go to print. None of your creations yet. We'll get to that. But we talked last episode about you wrote Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew. What was the other big
Bobbsey Twins.
Bobbsey Twins,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then Archie, right?
Yeah.
A couple of different titles for Archie.
Yep.
Scooby Doo,
Yep.
Batman,
Yep.
Sherlock Holmes.
Yep.
Who else can we add to that list so people can know?
Oh,
Oh yes, Tarzan,
yeah.
Tarzan,
Black Panther
Black Panther,
and now Captain America, Sam Wilson.
Sam Wilson, yes. Which it's just I love that Sam Wilson, Captain America, is getting uh, what he's getting and the attention he's getting. And having been a Falcon and it's particularly a Sam Wilson fan since Captain America and the Falcon, it really deeply in my heart. I have a pride. But I am looking for the day, and I'm hoping it happens in the movie where he's just referred to as Captain America, and people understand that's who it is. I understand the Steve Rogers. It's a huge shadow to emerge from, but God, I'm waiting for that moment. So yeah, you did all those things, and this will lead into hopefully some of the other stuff. But it was a situation of saying yes to opportunities. I'm not sure if you sat around saying, God, my life won't be complete if I don't write the Bobbsey Twins. It was an opportunity, and he said, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep doing this. And things build. Saying yes to opportunities early builds. However, sometimes in those situations, you have a glorious moment. And for you, it was being asked to create Orpheus for the Batman world, an African American hero that worked in a particular neighborhood in Gotham and wasn't really that impressed with Batman. Why are you here? Not in my neighborhood. You never come here, right? 5-issue limited series that has risen to cult status. Yeah, it's a small cult. I understand. It's
Oh,
not. There are some big cults
pretty.
out there,
Yeah.
but we know of one famous young African American emerging celebrity, the co-founder of Black Nerd Problems, Omar Holman, who, whenever he gets a chance to talk about Orpheus, was screaming for the return of Orpheus. But I wanted to talk about that because this is that experience that creatives also have to be able to weather. And that's when, in a lot of people's minds, unfairly, a person in power says no. Orpheus was in existence in the DC universe for what, a year and a half, 2 years?
Something like that.
And then I don't know if we're going to name him or not, but somebody said no and killed him off. Nobody has to stay dead in comics, so that doesn't mean it's the end of it. But can we speak to the experience that every creative will have where a dream is realized and then a dream is dashed?
That's interesting because I don't know that I've ever fully embraced how I felt about the overall experience. So let me do it this way, and I'll try and keep it concise. Um, One, it was because of a character that I created independently, which was my character Blackjack, that and some of the issues that we were able to produce with that that drew attention to me at the DC offices. And one of the people that took notice of me was at that time then an associate editor by the name of Joe Ilyich. And
Oh,
Joe was working with or alongside the very renowned and unfortunately has moved on, Denny O'Neil.
sure.
And I get called into the DC offices and with a discussion with these two people, given the opportunity to create a black hero for the Batman universe. Now, as one, as a kid who grew up reading Batman, and
Mm-hmm.
he was like my number one hero of all the superheroes that I was reading about growing up, and then who had a dear friend who passed away who portrayed Batman in our little 8mm movies years before. This was Kismet. This was the universe making all kinds of sense here. And I really went at the job, as a partial fanboy, but also recognizing that here was an opportunity to create an African American hero for this line of books. And the first thing that went through my mind was what I didn't want to do. and I didn't want him to be, as was unfortunately somewhat typical, more so than not in comics, that he was going to be a school teacher or a social worker or an ex-convict. I wanted him to come from something closer to real world and not necessarily from a lot of the places that one, when reading material at that time, would find your Black protagonist coming from, which is urban blight situation, single
Right.
parent situation, again, some sort of criminal background, blah, 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 blah. So I had this character with two parents, two professionals. Both of them had
Hmm.
their independent careers. I've been married for years, raised him, that he was artistically inclined and eventually wanted to be a dancer. And he had been harassed as a young person coming up by just kids in the neighborhood, giving him a hard time about being a dancer and being a sissy and all that. So he'd started studying the martial arts when he was young because he felt he needed to be able to kick butt and take names to defend himself. And then he reached a career point after graduating college. So again, there you go. He didn't drop out, went off on tour with a company and began to see the world and see a lot of the disparaging, unfair, and somewhat violent aspects of the world. Got involved in a few things just as an ordinary person who couldn't turn his head away, and came back to Gotham with this feeling like I should be able to do something. And some situations came up, and eventually he was approached and given, and I'm paring all this down, given an opportunity by a sort of a covert organization to actually become a soldier in this war for justice and all that. And maybe aspects of that could seem, I don't know how that's going to fly. I don't know how this is going to fly. He's not this, he's not that. Yeah, he's not those things by deliberate choice. I'm not going to go the
Right.
stereotypical. And I didn't get a lot of pushback from Denny because soon after that he retired from the company, and then Joe went out. But the books got done. I got to do this 5-part story, and it was a big story. It involved a lot of the Batman family. It
Hmm.
involved international criminals in Gotham, and it dealt with some social issues that I felt I could do, still respecting the iconic character of Batman, still recognizing who he was and how he was being portrayed at that time, but also make some statements about Gotham and about race relationships and about being a hero. And I got to do all that in those 5 issues. And then I wasn't allowed to do any more books. And
Because there was a different editor in charge, right?
there was a different editor in charge, and there was an interesting upper level or upper echelon attitude change that sort of froze me out. And I never really understood why, because the editors at the level that I'd been working with, we all got along. They never had any complaints about my work, but suddenly I couldn't get any work, or I could
Mhm.
barely get any work. And
So as a creative and as a show for creatives, how do you deal with the freeze out? How do you deal with the potentially unexplained or the potentially unfair rejection?
how
Because you
I
kind, I mean,
dealt with it is how I dealt with it. How
well,
people dealt
sure,
with it is different ways. But for me, it was trying to A was always trying to get an answer. That's one of the things. I don't like to take blind swings at people or institutions.
right,
More of a, to use an uncomfortable metaphor, I'm more of a sharpshooter. I
yeah.
want to see the bullseye. I want to know what it is I'm really going after. And so trying to get a straight answer was hard. And I can be thankful of some of the people within the offices who eventually leaked information to me, that I eventually became somewhat clearer about what was happening, but I could only
Is
speculate as to why.
okay. Is it
And
worth
again, I'm
explaining
gonna
that here?
no, what I
Okay.
would say is that the inference was a couple of people, again, in the upper echelon, quote unquote, didn't like my style. That was one. Although, again, the people sharing this information with me really thought that was bull
Mm.
and felt there was something else that had to do more with, as I like to laughingly put it, the lack of necessity for me to use copper tone.
Ooh, wow.
But again, no clear accusation, no clear target, no specific, yes, that's it. So if you're in the situation where, yeah, you can assume something and go off about that. If you're right, okay, you make a lot of noise and you reveal it. If you're wrong, you look like the unprofessional loudmouth who was a problem to begin with, and I knew this, and therefore that's why we didn't
Right.
want, or you didn't want, or I didn't want to use with him because of this, that, and the other. So what I did was I remained the professional that I am, and I dealt with that. I did get some work on some other titles through editors who did like my work. And because I was never in a position to confront someone about this, I had to live with that. I had to live with the fact that sometimes there are people in position that can make your life heaven or hell.
Mm,
And you have to make your own decisions about how you're going to deal with that at the time. You have to pick your battles and
mm,
decide really what do you want out of this? How do you want to come out of this? How do you want to survive this? Or do you not care, in which you can blow everything up and not give a flying squirrel? I cared about how I felt walking those halls. I've cared about how I wanted to be seen as I move forward. So I was, again, my best professional self. And karma is something that's an interesting creature, because I will say that without me ever doing anything, eventually certain people wound up paying, not because of me, but because of who they were or are, wound up paying a price for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, overlapping and previous to that experience and post that experience, you went a completely different route as opposed to this you have with Mega Books and Marvel and DC and I forget which company puts out Scooby-Doo. Is that DC?
That was DC as well. Yeah.
And then Archie. You've had a lot of traditional publishing experience,
Mhm.
and we're not even covering all of it.
No,
Um,
like I said, I've got stuff here.
let's see the stuff.
Last episode, we reluctantly but clearly announced some of the things that you had worked on that quite possibly should not be revealed. But you know what? It's years later, and who cares?
Yeah.
Oh, so
Any NDA is gone. So
yeah,
Hardy Boys,
this
Bobbsey
is Hardy
Twins,
Boys,
yeah.
Bobbsey Twins. And it's funny because once again, and this is talking about writing, my first trip to Africa was because of this book.
Hmm.
I can do that way. There we go. It's
Endangered
something.
species, yeah.
Yes. I wrote the premise for a three issue or three book Hardy Boys adventure involving smuggling. And it was an organization, a huge criminal organization that had smuggling on three fronts. And one of them was animals, another one was arms, and the third was people. And so mine was the one that dealt with, I got to write this book, and that was took them to Africa and dealt with slaughter of elephants and things like that, and the brutal scenario there. Then there was another book was written by another writer, but I plotted it out, and that was gun and weapon smuggling in Europe. And then the third book that I plotted out was smuggling people in from Europe and other countries into the United States.
Hmm.
And all of that was me tying into things that were going on at the time in the news, in life that I was aware of. And going to Africa, people say, well, you could have just done research through films and books and things like that. And that's absolutely true. There is a way that you can do research without placing yourself in an environment.
But as they say, the
Yes,
map is not the territory.
that's right. And the other thing that's missing from reading books and watching films and looking at photographs is a feel of the place, a physical five senses experience of
Right.
a place, which in and of itself can trigger and inspire you in ways that photographs and films and books never could.
Sure.
So I saw things in the 10 days that I traveled all throughout Kenya. I saw things that definitely filtered into that book, but also fed me for various other projects for several years thereafter.
Cool. Cool.
So that was that. And the
What else
Bobbsey
do you have to
Twins,
show and tell?
Yeah, the Bobbsey Twins was funny because this was the first Bobbsey Twins book I did, which is called
Mhm.
the
Trouble in Toyland,
Trouble in Toyland. Okay,
number
which is
7
fun
there,
and everything,
essentially.
and I'll talk about that in a moment. And this was a chocolate covered clue, which was actually my homage to Sherlock Holmes.
Really?
Yes, because there's a Sherlock Holmes story called, was it The Six Napoleons, in which something is hidden inside of six busts of Napoleon Bonaparte.
Ah, fantastic.
I had a mystery where something was hidden inside pastry that had
Now,
been
is
baked at a particular pastry shop and then various items sent out to the customers. And
now
some of
is this is this Alex Simmons mixing Sherlock Holmes with the Little Rascals episode when they bake a cake and put shoes and stuff in it?
actually think about that one, but I have seen that episode. And so maybe somewhere in the back of my head, yeah, yeah. This is again, as creatives, we see things, we experience things, we read things, we feel things. And then sometimes some of that filters into our work or filters through us and affects us in ways that are eventually revealed in our work. And so it was fun for me to do the mystery. And the other thing I'll say about this, and this goes to one of my philosophies about character creations and working on, I'm sorry, let me do this in two stages. One, I've written novels, I've written plays, I've written comic books, I've written film scripts. Never half step on something because it's a children's project
Right.
or because it's a short story. No, you always go at it with the same methodology and psychology about trying to do quality work. So the Bobbsey twins came to me because there's four kids, two sets of twins, 12-year-olds and 8-year-olds. And the editors who were working on that series at that time were having problems with several of their other writers and the individual stories those writers were doing because they weren't gelling. They were just always running into problems and couldn't get the books out. And I had been working at the offices as an assistant at that time. So this is before my writing career really blossomed a bit. And I kept hearing there's discussions and their problems. And I went, can I just make a suggestion? And they went, well, okay, let's hear it from the guy there, staples things together.
The stapler.
Yeah, you get the stapler. Yeah. I said, you keep complaining about these four kids. It was just one detective, it'd be less a problem and blah. I said, did you ever think about these four kids as being one, each one is one part of a whole detective? And they said, what do you mean? Each one of them has a particular ability or quirk that when they work together enables them to figure out the mystery. And they looked at me and said, could you say that again? So I sat down with them and I explained the way I saw it in my head. Now, remember, I'm not coming at them at that time with a whole lot of experience writing books like galore,
Right, right.
but storytelling and character building
Sure.
and being fascinated by different types of people and characters, all of that stuff was filtering through me to throw out this hypothesis.
Mhm.
And so they said, would you talk to our other writers about it? And I said, sure, but can we like all meet in one place as opposed to a bunch of individual phone calls? So they pulled everybody together. We had a lunch there and everything. And I had done some work and written some things up. And I pitched to them. And I said, one of the things is you've got two boys, two girls, one 12, one 8, one 8 years of age.
Of each
Who
gender.
are they as individuals? What are their personalities? What are they like? What are their quirks? What little ticks do they have? And we built that up and then looked at how those things could facilitate figuring out a mystery story. And then worked some more of that out. And then everybody went off to work on their own individual stories, and every story worked out.
Alex Simmons, the savior of the Bobbsey
The
twins, ladies and
Bobbsey
gentlemen.
twins, yes. Yes. Without me, there'd be no. But again, sometimes it's how you look at the project. And if some people, I'm not saying those particular writers, although I met writers later who did, but if you're looking at, oh, it's these kids, they're just kids. No, they're children. But who are they?
Yeah.
You've got to see them as people because then you understand how they think, how they act, what they might say, and that feeds you the information you need to write your story.
Yeah. What else do we have?
Oh, you mentioned some Archie, so we have
All
some.
right, I was hoping you would bring that up
Yep,
yet.
yeah. I have two
Um,
Archies in
because
particular.
that helps us build from your approach to the Bobbsey twins to your approach here.
Yep.
While you were writing these stories, Chuck Clayton, let's talk about this character.
Yes. Chuck, this is Chuck right here. Chuck is the son of Coach Clayton, who had been an established character in the Archie comics. I don't remember exactly what year, but every now and then you would see Coach Clayton, who's black, because Chuck is black, Coach is black, would pop into a story as the coach at Riverdale High. Chuck then started to pop up somewhere around the 70s in stories. Now, again, understanding the structure of Archie comics, a lot of their stories are only 6 pages, 8 pages,
Right.
and it's like a little collection of quickies here. So Chuck might pop up in one out of every 18 stories or something like that. And they knew one thing about Chuck. He loved to draw. He was going to be a cartoonist when he grew up. He was going to be a comic book artist when he grew up. So he was the guy, the go-to guy for drawings and art. At one point, I'm working at Archie Comics, and I'd already done a couple of big multi-stories with Archie. And they said, look, we got this character here, and he's never had his own book. And we wanted to know, you like to teach kids how to make their own comics, which I did. I used to, for several years, I did workshops with kids, teaching them in schools and everything, teaching them how to create their own comics. He says, do you think you could come up with a story for Chuck to do that? And I went, a story? Are you kidding me? I can come up with several. So they gave me a 4 book run, and eventually it was pulled into this graphic novel collection, this trade paperback collection. But I came up with 4 individual stories where Chuck and children are involved in comics and his artwork. And even then, it was okay, Chuck's been around since the 70s. His father is Coach Clayton, his mother, they'd established her, but no other family
Yeah.
for 30 years. So I said, what's his grandmother's name? We don't, aunts, uncles. So I went back, and so one of the stories we meet his grandmother. Another story we reference another character, and it was building up a bit of his world and understanding what he wanted and why he wanted to do what he wanted to do and what he was influenced by that enabled me to do those 4 stories. And it was funny because years later, a few years later, I'm doing a signing for the book at a school in Philadelphia, and these children are coming by in droves, and the school or sponsor had already bought a bunch of the books, so I'm just signing like crazy. And at some point I look at the kids and I go, kids, in this room full of kids, like, do you have any idea why I'm writing on your books? And and they all went, no. I busted out laughing. I said, "Did they not tell you I wrote the story?" And they're looking at me, and the adults in the room are going, "You didn't tell me?" And I didn't tell them. Well, you're the teacher. I didn't know. So I said, "I get to write on your book because
I
what's
wrote
in
your
your book."
book. Yeah.
And I explained a little bit about it, and they go, "Oh, how'd you do this?" So then I got questions and things like that, and I continued signing while I was doing it, while I was talking to them.
He's
So,
always the teaching artist, ladies and gentlemen,
well,
that
yeah,
Alex Simmons.
again, it's we do what we do for different reasons. I mean, some people do it because it's a profession. Some people do it because it's satisfying just for them. I do it for a bunch of reasons, and I think one of them is that the kid in me never died.
Yeah.
He's still wildly alive and quite excited and happy to face each day.
Even
But
at 932
932 days so far. But the other thing
years.
is that
Years.
there were people who were there for me. There were people who showed
Yeah,
me how to do things. There were people who turned me on to
sure.
art, music, and
So
things like.
you're paying it forward.
Yeah, because
All right.
why not?
All right.
Why not do that?
I want to take you, I know this, we're approaching the end of our time, but I want to take you to the wildly divergent path you took to create all that work is so enjoyable and it's wonderful but I think you're perhaps best known for your creation of Arron Blackjack Day, who is much to my delight, yes, and he's also right behind you with a wonderful painting.
Yes,
So we're
Brian
gonna have
Stelfreeze. Brian. Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna have 2 questions. I'm always lying when I say just two. But one, where did he come from? And then two, why did you go independent with? So where did Arron Blackjack Day come from? He is a distillation of a lot of your passions, yes. But let's hear the secret origins of creating Arron Blackjack Day.
Again, to abbreviate, the kid in me who grew up with a single parent watching all kinds of movies and television shows and reading comics, who was fascinated with the world and curious and wanted to see and do things, grew up during a time period when Black heroes were not in my face. They were
Right.
not there. And even though by my late teens, there were a couple out there, the first 17 years of my life,
Nothing.
basically almost nothing. And so one could say, then how on earth could you possibly envision? Because as imagination is very powerful, and I think to some degree I was fortunate, I couldn't not see myself doing those things.
Right.
I wasn't somewhere in an environment, either in my house or in my head, where because I didn't see anyone like me doing it, I couldn't imagine me doing it. So there's a part of me as a kid who wanted to be a galloping hero, who wanted to help people, who wanted to have adventures and stop evildoers and all of that stuff and right wrongs. And coming up through the civil rights movement, you suddenly become aware that there were people like you who did those things in the past, and some are doing it now. And okay, so I could envision myself doing that as a kid, and now I'm getting validation that we actually did. I want a hero, I want to create a hero who reflects that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people said, so you want to create a Black hero for Black people? And I said, no, I want to create a Black hero, or a hero who's Black, for
For
everyone
all
to
people.
read. And I don't know that it would reach everyone, but that's what I'm going for, because my belief was, despite the turd of the world, we people of color are a part of the world. We have existed and will continue to exist as an integral part of the matrix of this planet, so that I don't see us as this separate entity. I see us as a part of the greater whole. And subsequently, I want to reach as many people as possible. So that was my head. I had Arron Day as this individual character. And then it was like I did with the Bobbsey Twins and anything else that I've ever worked on. Who is he? Some of me is in there, but really, who is Arron? What's his life like? What was his parent life like? What was his family life like? I had no siblings, and I had no father in the picture. And so Arron had a father and a mother, but okay, what was that like? And where did it differ here and there? And so again, looking at history, real history, and what happened to Black men because Arron's stories take place in the 1930s. So you've got that whole different vibe in society scenario for people of color. If you think there's racism and separatism now, whoa, okay. And that was considered normal back then. So his father had many Black men fought in wars, in the army, in the military, not been recognized, come home to jobs that were no better than when they went off, and yet many of them had gone off to die for the country. His father was one of those Blacks who decided, why am I going to go back to the United States and be a Pullman porter or a shoe shine or a butler or a laborer making chump change, when I'm good as a soldier, I'm good as a mercenary, and I can make better money and send back to my family. So that was the choice that he made. And he was sending money back to his family. But the wife is going, well, it's nice you're sending money back to me and the kids, but the kids don't know their father, and I don't have my husband here. And that ain't okay. So we're going to come over there, wherever the hell you are, and you can go off into your battles wherever, but we're going to be in a town or a city or a village not that far away, so that whenever you finish, you can come back to us easily. Because again, 1930s, you don't have jets.
Right.
that instant kind of travel thing. It's weeks or months, sometimes a year or so between being able to visit anybody. So Arron, at like 8 years of age, is suddenly
Sorry.
a globe hopper.
Sorry.
Bless you, bless you. He and his older sister, by a year, are now seeing parts of the world that black children, average
Never
black
saw.
children,
Yeah.
didn't see. And they're seeing things and being exposed to things. These were all of the steps I went through to create this character and to create that world, and then decide what kind of stories I wanted to tell and what kind of people he was going to encounter and what kind of person he was going to be and what kind of flaws and struggles he was going to have to deal with, because he's not a pure golden child here. This is somebody who's got his own issues.
Yeah.
And
So,
that was my pursuit.
so creating them and layering the characters in such a fascinating way. Arron Blackjack Day is uh, his heroism makes me think of him on the same level as Captain America, but the complexities of his life give us a little more to chew on, a little more to chew on. It's fascinating.
And where
Um,
he is in that time, if Sam Wilson as Captain America was trying to do this in the 1930s,
yeah, he would.
how much harder it would be.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things I love about Blackjack is that those challenges are coming around again, ladies and gents. So the Blackjack stories are more relevant than ever. But you went independent. Can you talk about that? Because for someone with the history you had, it was a pretty bold choice, and I think has resulted in some true gems of storytelling featuring Blackjack. But it's not an easy decision.
No, and it was not my first, I assure you. But what happened was, and again, something that one can, in certain cases, I can say point blank, it was because the character was black and didn't have tights on. There were people who I approached to publish the stories. At the time, I had a couple, and couldn't see the character. He was black. He didn't have superpowers. There wasn't an audience for him. And literally, that was told to me even when the books were coming out. This will never sell here. This will never sell there because it'll sell in Watts. It'll sell in Harlem. It'll sell in Bed-Stuy, but it's not going to sell anywhere else. And so certain companies turned it down. Um, there was a year of back and forth with editors at one company at DC, as a matter of fact, with an editor there who was who was in favor
Championing.
of the project, and he couldn't get it past the upper echelon either. And so the reality was, I looked at it and I thought, maybe it's me. I have a lot of faith in this. I think there's a great story here. There's a couple of people who agree with me, but maybe I'm just being full of myself and I'm joking, and maybe this isn't going to work. And I then let several people see it who were professionals in the business as well as in film. And they all went, no, this is really good. This is tight. This is a strong character. This is that. I said, if it's all that and no one else will do it, am I supposed to do it? And I think, again, going back to what I talked about in terms of how my head works and theater and all of these other things that I'd been through, I knew it was possible to produce the product when I say by myself, meaning with a team of people, I could spearhead producing the product. I had no idea whether or not it would be successful, but I knew it was possible for us to produce it. And so I found a backer, someone who had funds that would allow us to hire people. And I hired Joe Bennett, who was an
Mhm.
established comic book illustrator in the industry at that time, but lived in Brazil. And he did a fantastic job on the first three issues of the first story arc. I hired James Brown, and I don't mean the Godfather of Soul, but
This guy does have soul. I've met
yes,
him.
he does. It's a colorist, fantastic colorist named James Brown. He lived in Boston. He did all the coloring on it. A friend of mine, since I'd known since we were in high school together, named Liz Sheehan, did all the graphic designs. Bill McKay, my dear friend, buddy, mentor, was the editor on it and was guidance in that respect. I treated this like a full-blown project. It wasn't just a vanity. Oh, I write something that's going to be great,
No.
fantastic, just put it out there. No, let's do the job. Let's do the work. Trying to
What
make
now?
it
What
was
was
it
the
big?
first the first story arc was called?
Second Bite of the Cobra,
And then you did another story arc.
Blood and Honor,
And
Blackjack.
those are both available in trade paperbacks.
Yep, yep, they are.
And I think both of them for those of you who are out there and are working for a television or film producer, either one of these, just read the trade paperback, you'll see the movie. There's two movies right there.
Yeah.
And then we have the rapid reads,
Right?
which
Which is
are
this is one of.
right, and there's about 4 or 5 of those.
Yep, 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 yep.
Again, you can have a couple of seasons of blackjack, ladies and gentlemen,
You wrote a
uh,
couple of them.
just with what exists.
Oh,
So,
here's something else too. Here's something else
yes,
quick,
what else
quick.
you got? Father Day Chronicles, and that's
Yes.
Mary Day. Who is Mary Day to Arron?
Blackjack's older sister.
You know?
And the quick story about that is, and again, I will make it quick. I always knew he had a sister who was a year older than him, that she was also a fighter. Even when they were kids, they fought back to back against anybody who came, any bullies that came after them. They grew up, a certain portion of them grew up in Europe. Like I said, they went over there with their father and mother and all that. But eventually the parents get killed and they stay for another few years with friends, but then they both come back to the United States. Arron's going to follow in his father's footsteps to become an adventurer and a mercenary.
Sure.
And Mary goes, no, I don't want to be like mom, waiting at the house to hope that you come back and everything. And I also don't want that kind of life. She wants a house and a community and a neighborhood and all that. So she moves to the Southwest. And I remember thinking when I did that all those years ago when I created her, thinking, why would a black woman, young black woman who's living in one of the most racially unpleasant times in the United States, why would she want to move to the South anything in the United States?
Right.
And I couldn't answer the question consciously. I just knew that's where she was going.
Right.
And so I did it. And it was years of writing little stories where, Arron's doing this, that, and he get a letter from his sister or whatever. And I still couldn't answer that question. And then finally, a couple of years ago, I wrote these 4 short stories about her. And the first one, I'm working on it. And the answer came to me through working on that story. And I went, oh, geez, of course, it makes perfect sense. And that, I won't say what the reason is. You can read the book. But the thing about it that is important is to understand that even with my years of experience writing and knowing how I feel about creating characters and really getting to understand them and know them, sometimes it takes time for you to discover things about the characters you're working on.
Yeah. And sometimes they don't tell you until they're ready to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when it comes, hopefully you go, oh, of course, that makes yes. But yeah, so it was a joy. So I'm glad I did that. And I still stand behind the characters and the wonderfulness of them. Oh, by the way, you can't see that easily either because of
the Raven League. We didn't talk about the
Raven League. Yes. That was a series I did for Penguin Books before it became Penguin Random House. But that was a Sherlock Holmes spinoff, if you will, of these young kids who lived during that time period and have worked on at least one case with Sherlock, but they now are getting involved in their own adventures. And that was another one of those projects that I did that I had a great time. And I got to write those with my dear friend, Bill McKay.
Sure. Who owns the rights to those characters? Okay. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. And that leads us to our last question today. We hope that everybody got some sense of that we all go through similar ups and downs and similar creative challenges. And it's that pursuit of what's in your heart and what's that drives us through. But it is Alex Simmons' 932nd birthday. And we did have a candle before, and he did blow it out. God bless him. If you could make a wish about what you might want to do, given the choice to do anything, is there a character of yours that you'd like to do more work on? Is there something else that you would like? What would you like to do, say, in the next 5 or 10 years?
So much.
That's the key to being a creative, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, first and foremost, as long as I can, I want to keep creating fun projects, entertaining projects, enlightening projects. I want to work with good people. I've been blessed to be able to do that, present company included. I feel strongly that my purpose on this earth was to be as much of the person that I have been. Doesn't mean I feel I was perfect. No, that's not what I'm saying. But to be true to myself, I was meant to do this. I was meant to tell stories, whether it was acting or writing or drawing or whatever. That was so much a passion and a part of my life that it never went away. I think it was Stephen King, you said at one point, if you keep hearing the story, you can't forget it. It keeps coming back to you.
That's the one you got to write. Yeah.
Every single year of my life that I am consciously aware of, I've been fascinated by stories and wanted to do this and wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So I've answered that calling, and I want to be able to continue to do that. And if I were given the opportunity to write any characters that still speak to my heart from my youth, I still haven't done the Lone Ranger.
There you go.
Lone Ranger and Tonto, because
Sure.
that's important to me. And there's maybe one or two others, but that would be a good one. That would be very satisfying for me if I have an opportunity to do at least one good story with those two characters.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
We've had a guy on who's written Lone Ranger. Maybe we'll talk to him and see if, hey, who's got a soft spot over there that we can pitch
You
to.
never know. You
never know.
But again, I shouldn't be unhappy because, again, like you said earlier, it's Batman and Tarzan and Sherlock Holmes and Archie and Scooby-Doo. It's so many characters that I've had the good fortune of being able to work on. So I shouldn't be greedy, but I am.
Well, but it may not be greedy for the artist to want to continue to create. That's like saying it's greedy for us to want to continue breathing. So many other people need air.
Yeah.
It's natural to all of us. All right, very interesting. And there is now an offer on the table. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen.
See where this one goes.
We hope that this birthday celebration of the legendary Alex Simmons was able to lend you some experiential information that can help drive your own creative journey so that we can help in some small way to get you to tell your own damn story.
You're here.
Till next time, ladies and gentlemen. Hi ho, Silva.
Away!
Happy birthday, man. I love you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Take care,
Peace,
everybody.
everybody.